Hello. Today we are looking at Dracula, chapters 6 and 7, and we're going to be talking about two different literary elements that Bram Stoker uses here. One is foreshadowing, and the other one is irony. But first, let's just talk a little about what happens in these chapters. Two main things stand out to me as important in chapters 6 and 7. There's Renfield, who is the inmate in the asylum, and then there's the ship in the harbor. And these are both big pieces of the puzzle of the book. So Renfield, I mentioned him before and said he was a very interesting character, and now we're getting to see why. So what is he up to? Dr. Seward calls him a zoophagous maniac. What does that mean? That means zoe means life, phagus means eat, so eating life. He is a man who eats life. Sound like a vampire? Yes, it does sound like a vampire. But Renfield himself is not a vampire. We will find that he has connections to Dracula, sort of psychically, but we're not quite there yet. But he's aligned with Dracula in this brotherhood of eating life. The way Renfield goes about it is he collects flies, and he feeds the flies to the spiders. He feeds the spiders to the birds, and then he eats the bird. And why does he do all that? Well, he's thinking, okay, if I feed 5 flies to this spider, then that's 5 lives in one spider. And if I do that with 5 different spiders, that's 25 lives that I can feed to that bird. So when I eat that bird, I'm going to be consuming all of those lives, all that life energy, which he thinks will empower him. So again, it's a similar thing to being a vampire, but it's more disturbing, I think, because it's not supernatural. It's just the guy who likes to eat animals with lots of life forces in them, as far as he defines that. So Renfield is a disturbed and disturbing character. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about was the ship. So they see this ship out in the ocean, off the harbor, and it's not really going anywhere. It's just sort of sitting there and being tossed about by the waves. And no one really knows what's going on with it. It seems Eastern European. They call it Russian. Russian, same area as Transylvania. So very close. And it doesn't come into the harbor. It just sort of floats around outside the harbor. So right away, it's mysterious and a little disturbing. But then when we find out what has happened on the ship, it's even more disturbing. This is where Dracula starts to really show his true colors as a vampire. So this ship is carrying boxes of soil. In this vampire myth, the vampire needs his home soil. I forget how many boxes of it. He has like 40. Boxes of soil from Transylvania. He needs that to survive, to gain his strength, and he sleeps in the coffin. I believe the coffin holds the soil. So in one of these, I think it's 40 boxes of soil, there is also a vampire. So no one on the boat knows this. They think it's kind of strange that they're transporting soil from Transylvania to London. But one by one, they start disappearing. And it's, I don't know, I love this chapter. It's a great use of suspense as the suspense builds and builds. And we know that it's Dracula who's, killing these people, right? But they don't know. They are just living in this state of crew members are disappearing, no sign of them. What's going on? They have a sighting of a strange man, but then they can't find him anywhere. And then finally, when it comes down to just the captain, he has figured out what he's up against. He has a crucifix so that Dracula can't touch his hands, because Dracula can't touch a crucifix. So he holds that in his hands and ties his hands and his body to the wheel of the ship so that it will go in the right direction for the remainder of the trip, and that Dracula can't untie him because he can't get near the crucifix. So very grim, very, disturbing if you think about it, suspenseful. It's where I think the book starts to pick up speed, and you think, wow, okay, what is this going to be like once Dracula gets to London? This fertile hunting ground. And when they finally get the boat into shore, a giant black dog jumps off and runs away. Now we know that Dracula has been linked to the wolves in Transylvania before, so it's not much of a stretch to believe that this big black dog is Dracula in animal form, and he's running off to find a safe place before the sun comes up that he can shelter, probably in Carfax Abbey, which is the building that he bought. That is right next to the asylum where Renfield is going through his process of eating lives. So these two characters are on a collision course. And a lot of this is what we call foreshadowing. It sets the tone. It helps sort of, you can think of it as predicting the future of the novel. It gives you information that helps you, as we talked about, predict what might happen next. So the mysterious deaths, all the things in the graveyard with the women, Mr. Swales, and then he dies because he saw something horrible and broke his neck. So really, it's starting to crank up the suspense. And he does that through foreshadowing. So all the events on the ship, what happens once he gets to London, even Lucy's sleepwalking, it's sort of an unnatural thing, sleepwalking, and it's getting worse. So as Dracula gets closer, everyone sort of feels it, but they don't know what they're feeling. Mr. Swales says that he can smell death in the air. Lucy is sleepwalking more and more. Mina is getting more and more worried about Jonathan because he hasn't returned yet, because he's trapped in Dracula's castle. But she doesn't know that. And that brings us to the second thing I wanted to talk about, which is irony. There are 3 types of irony. There's verbal irony, situational irony, and dramatic irony. Now, you're probably familiar with the first 2 more than you are with the third one. So let's start there. Verbal irony is when you say something, but you mean the opposite. So basically, this includes sarcasm, most of what we call sarcasm is really verbal irony. So you say, You say something, but you mean the opposite. Oh, that's really interesting. I could listen to this guy talk all day. That's sarcasm. That's verbal irony. And situational irony, you're probably also aware of. That's when things happen, but they have a result different than what you expect. Um, so I don't know if you guys know the Alanis Morissette song, Ironic. A lot of those things are not irony, but the ones that are situational irony. Saying, okay, I expect this, I expect to find this, but instead I found this other thing. That throws me off balance. It's not what I expected. That's situational irony. So the one that's being used in this chapter is what we call dramatic irony. Dramatic irony is used in fictional texts, and it's when we, the readers, the audience, know more about what's going on than the characters do. So we know all this stuff about Dracula and Jonathan, right? We know all about the Transylvania life that's been going on at night, right? And now we're in London, and the ship and the dog and the mysterious deaths. All of that foreshadowing is also dramatic irony, because Lucy and Mina don't have any idea what's causing this, but we, as the reader, we know for sure, it's Dracula. So that's called dramatic irony, when we know more than the characters know. And again, that helps with suspense. Like, if we know that Dracula is in this room and someone is approaching the room, they don't know that Dracula's in there, right? But we do, and so that gives us suspense as that person approaches, about their upcoming interaction with Dracula. So, verbal irony, when you say something and you mean the opposite, sarcasm. Situational irony, when you expect something and you get something different, especially if it's, again, the opposite of what you expect. And dramatic irony, where the audience, the readers, know more about the situation than the characters in the text do. So, that's irony and foreshadowing. And yes, that is all I want to talk about today. I really hope you enjoyed these chapters. I just love this book, and I love that chapter on the ship. I think that's great foreshadowing of the horror that's going to happen when Dracula finally makes it to London. Okay, that's Dracula chapter 6 and 7. And there'll be another 5-question quiz on that you'll need to fill out today. And that's your assignment. Okay, great. Have a great day.